like, message telling me that it's going to be recording soon,
Yeah,
but I don't actually know when it starts. I'm pretty sure it started now, though. But thank you so much for being here, Patrick Rahal. This is Mr. Most Days Off Loves Everything, and I usually talk about how much I love The Simpsons every week on the Best Darn Diddly Review Show. But on Friday afternoons, I talk about something random that I love. And in this case, I'm just going to say that I love patty cakes. I love Patrick Rahal. That's what this episode is going to be about. We are going to talk about the fact that you are now a published author, my dude. Congratulations, first and foremost. How does it feel?
It feels pretty awesome. Like, for the longest time, it was very, very surreal. It's like, oh, your book's getting published. And it's like, yeah, but like, until I have it and hold it and it's in my hand, like, it doesn't feel real. Even when other people, like, I was one of the last people to get my book out of everyone who
noticed that, actually. I got my book before you got your book, and like, I saw your Instagram post. Hold on, I'm gonna just show off a little bit. Look how this is if I hold it naturally. That's because I've actually been reading it. Nice. I need to get a pristine copy autograph that I'll just never touch, like all my collectibles. But yeah, I noticed that you were one of the last people to actually get the book, which I thought was kind of funny just in its own right. But I also just want to note how, like, literally, like, joy-filled you looked in your picture. Like, you had like a glow in your eyes that like is usually only reserved for the way you look at ashes.
True. Yeah, it was. We actually did a live, like, unboxing when she got her copy, because she got her copy 2 days before I got mine. I've only dude, I've had mine less than a week. It came out on August 18th, and what happened was, like, a lot of people kept asking me, like, "Where's my book? Where's my book? Where's my book?" I'm like, I don't know.
I'm not the publisher. I wrote the damn thing.
But the warehouse guy who I've been in contact with, his name's Chris, and he's an awesome dude. He was like, yeah, so the pre-orders kind of took us off guard, because normally we get, like, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 pre-orders for, like a prose book. Like, they normally do graphic novels, and they might get 50, maybe 100 if it's like a big, a big release. Writer. And they're like, yeah, so we ordered 50 and we had to order more because the pre-orders wiped out what we had. So we needed to get more from the printer, and they've just ordered their third. They put in their third order recently, but I don't blame them for not getting my book on time. I blame FedEx.
Okay.
So it got to a town in Connecticut last Tuesday. And then it went to a town that's about 20 minutes away. And I know exactly where the FedEx facility is, because it's right near where I used to work, where Ashes still works at the lab. And it's about a 20-minute ride. And it left that facility at 10:39 on a Wednesday. I didn't get the book until Saturday morning.
Really?
I could have hopped on a goddamn pogo stick and got it faster. Like, it was unbelievable. I could have learned how to ride a unicycle and then gone out there to get it. Like, it's unreal. It's 20 minutes away, and it took 4 days. So I don't want to hear anybody ever talk poorly about the efficacy of the United States Postal Service, because everybody got theirs. Buddy of mine, director Kurando Mitsutaki, who is just an all-around awesome dude, he got his book on September 4th. He was the first person to get it.
Wow.
Like, holy, you got yours quick.
I'll be honest, dude. There was a point where I like thought about texting you, because I was like, man, it seems like it's been a while, and I thought the book was out already. But I knew that you would probably be overwhelmed with that type of thing. So I was like, I'll just be cool. And then sure enough, it came like the next day.
Yeah, it officially launched on August 18th. And like I said, they had to order more from the printer in order to fulfill the orders.
Yeah.
And started, as soon as they came in, like they came in on, I forget what day it was, but Chris was sending me pictures. He's like, here's all of the shipping labels that I'm printing. It was just like this whole long, like CVS receipt. shipping labels. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. That's so cool.
Yeah, that's honestly like the best problem to have. Like, I mean, in terms of like reasons that you could have a delay in shipment, that literally I think is like the best one.
Yeah, it made me happy because I was like, oh, man, like, because I only get royalty checks twice a year. So one in January, one in July, and the book came out in August. So obviously, I'm not going to get paid for anything I didn't sell yet.
Makes
but
sense.
I was like, oh, good. Like I might, depending on how sales go, I could, potentially get a PS5 in January.
If you can find one, dude. That's the tricky part on that.
Maybe by January they might have them. Although if I can afford a PS5 at that point, I probably won't. I don't know. Maybe if we get a second stimulus check.
I feel you, man. I've pretty much like reserved the idea, like in my mind, that I could get a PS5 because the world is ending. So why not? But that's like starting to become my excuse for everything. So like, it's.
I don't need to pay my rent. The world's gonna end.
Why not try heroin? I mean, the world's coming to an end. No, it hasn't quite gotten there yet, but we'll see how the next presidential debate goes. But that's not what we're here to talk about today, my friend. I'm here to celebrate you, my friend and public and published author. But I want to dive more into the book in general because it, first of all, just has really dope cover art, which shout out your author's name so I can find it on the back here.
Jeanette Andromeda,
who does a fantastic job bringing your words to like life visibly right there on the page. She does animations for your haikus that you do, I believe, as well as just some of the basic illustrations in the book, and the cover art alone is just really fun.
She does an amazing job. Like if you can see just over my shoulder here, the Throwdown Thursday logo, she also did that.
That makes so much sense. Yeah, dope.
She has been getting better and better, and like these horror haikus kind of started, I want to say 2015, where like we met at a convention and we started talking, and like she's an artist and I'm a writer, so she was doing this. We kind of collaborated for this thing called Horror Haikus Day, where I would write a horror haiku and she would illustrate it. So we do one a week, every single week. And, I would see like the art that she would do. So it's like, all right, I have to step my game up because her art is so good. And then she would say that she would step her art game up to match like what I was coming up with. So like we were both kind of driving each other at the same time.
That's cool.
It's her art. I can't even tell you how impressive her art is. The story Refusal, it's the hand that's reaching up with all the runes and everything around it. Both a friend of mine and my wife, independent of each other, were like, I need to get that tattooed on myself. And she actually did. She snuck a couple of drawings in of both me and my wife. Well, here's
really what?
Here's Refusal. This is the one I was talking about there.
Sure, yeah.
It is. Let me get to it because I never remember what order these are in. So, that's me. If you look really closely, that's Costume is the name of that story.
No, dude, your claws do look exactly like that. Like she captured that perfectly.
Yeah, my big insectile eyes. If you look at the vest, it says Patsy right on it.
She even named you. Nice.
Yeah, and that one's my wife.
That's a good representation for sure. She's a great artist. Yeah. She really is. And I guess really maybe we should take a step back and actually kind of explain your book a little bit, because I've talked about stories now, we've talked about illustrations, and I said the word haiku just in case somebody was not hearing that or thought they weren't hearing that correctly. How would you define your book? Like, because it's not, I don't mean this in a negative way, but it's not normal. It's not a standard read.
It's not a straight narrative. No, every single entry is a standalone. There are certain things that kind of go together. So the story, the book starts out with 2-sentence stories. based on the Reddit thread that came out a few years ago, where people were just trying to tell the scariest stories they could tell with just 2 sentences. And I think like the winning one was, the last man on earth sat alone in his house. There was a knock on the door.
Yeah, that one's really good.
And like, that's it. That's the whole story. And so I was like, all right, well, I'm going to try telling some of my own. My favorite one is, I will open it up because I'll do a little reading because it's only 2 sentences, so it's not a lot. My favorite one is called Muddy Boots. And this is the illustration. It says, I hate when my husband leaves his muddy boots in the hallway. I don't like to nag, but he was buried in them. That's my favorite one of those. And then, like I was saying, you know, the horror haikus, for those who are unfamiliar, it's the Japanese style of poem where it's basically 3 lines, 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables, so 17 total. And I would try to tell an entire story through those 17 syllables. And then as you go through, you finish those. And she illustrated every one of those. There's 30 between the two genres there, I guess you could call them. Then you get into the short stories, and she did story headers for each one of these. So there's 10 story headers that I didn't know she was going to do, and they look absolutely amazing. And my short stories, like I said, some of them kind of fit together, but some of them, like I have this literary universe that I've created called the Riftverse, where there's like this interdimensional rift that opens up and all these Lovecraftian creatures pour out, and this like burst of energy comes through and like affects people in different ways. I actually have 2 other stories from that universe in anthologies. One's called More Lore from the Mythos, Volume 1, which came out last November. My story is, it's just a whole Lovecraftian anthology. My story is called The Shed, and it's Lovecraftian body horror.
Oh, very cool.
And I have another one that's coming out called Scavengers, and that anthology actually launches in 2 weeks. More Lore from the Mythos, Volume 2 comes out on the 17th of October.
Dude, that is like, so it sounds like maybe it was this, or maybe it's just a lot of things hitting at once, but it sounds like the everything's coming up Patsy, man. That's what it is. No, the floodgates are opening. People are seeing your talent, and stepping stones are being laid, it sounds like. That's really good.
Yeah, there's even another anthology that I'm part of that comes out on Halloween called VHS Nightmares.
Hell yes.
And every story centers around you know, like maybe a movie that you saw, or, you know, a night at the video store gone wrong. Mine's it's called Ladies Night. It's about 3 friends in high school, like their parents are away, so they all go over. It's like, you know, 1991. And so
because the VHS is a thing.
Yeah. And they each pick out a movie, and, you know, I think the most fun part of that was creating the fake movie titles.
Sure.
And one of them picked out a horror movie called like Lesbian Chainsaw Quinceañera 6, The Choppening.
I would watch that. Right? I mean, honestly, like that sounds like a movie that I would put up on Shudder at like 2 a.m.
It definitely, you know, and I know you'll appreciate this. Like, it definitely has like a Simpsons inspiration, because like all of their horror, like the bloodening and, you know, stuff like that. So the choppening is, it's a lot of these stories I've been working on for many, many years. There's 2 in there that are clearly go together. Roboctopus and Croctopus, because I love the Asylum films. Yeah,
I was actually going to bring that one, or I'm sorry, those ones up specifically, because that really very much relates to the last time you were on this show, when both you and your wife were here to talk about specifically bad, like, shark movies, but like bad in like a good way, like the type of film they're campy and they're fun and they play on the Sci-Fi Channel, and definitely that is what. I mean, you robotized like creatures, and you made it so fun. Yeah. And I can't wait till we get Rodoctopus versus Crocodile, Robodile, Crocodile.
Croctopus and Roboctopus.
There you go. Croctopus, yeah.
Builds on so they give the controlling neural net helmet. They're able to control the crocodile, which also has tentacles, which is clearly an homage to Sharktopus.
Right. And I don't want to give away spoilers, but I love you even for like a movie, for that type of asylum film, like you said, like you even have the human element already set up. Like there's stuff. Again, I don't want to say too much, but there's stuff happening behind the scenes with the humans involved in this story that is so like interesting and like could easily fill up a plot of a 90-minute just popcorn flick that you would just be like, oh my God, this is so, like the drama is there to hold us in our seats between like the fighting monster.
Yeah. There's enough going on, and it's also like that takes place in that same universe, the Riftverse, because they're these scientists that are trying to come up with something to combat these monstrous things that come out of nowhere. Well, not nowhere; they came out of the rift, but you know what I'm saying. Now,
where did the rift come from, Patsy?
Oh. You were. It's think of it kind of it like that Simpsons couch gag where they like zoom out from the couch and they keep going up through space till it comes back out and it's like Homer again.
Mm-hmm.
Like the as they zoom out, it's yeah. Now you were the first person to leave a review for my book, so I want to publicly thank you.
Oh yeah, dude, and that I'm since you brought it up, I was actually going to talk about elements that I did mention in that review, but specifically, you've talked about Halloween, and you've talked about The Simpsons, which other than Treehouse of Horror, makes me just think about the idea in general that. To me, like Halloween differ, like take movies, for instance, there's horror movies and there's Halloween movies. Horror movies are, fun, year round. They're scary by nature, versus Halloween movies tend to have more of an element of like comedy and season to them, or just, I don't know. I might be making some weird difference in my own head, but for me, that makes total sense. In your book, 100%, is a Halloween book. Like I would see it as being like that spirit where it isn't just there to terrify you. It does have some dark, scary moments. And there's actually one story specifically about that gets very dark with the human element, but it also has a lot of fun. Like you clearly have a lot of humor that you put into your writing. I think I mentioned in the review, you have a dark sense of humor, very much so. And that fits into this style. Where you do have these sometimes grotesque imagery, sometimes psychologically, I would say, scarring ideas, but combined with like a little bit of a laugh, sometimes in a very like you're laughing, but you're like, should I be laughing at this sort of way?
Yeah, it's the type of stuff that I like. If I'm gonna read something, or if I'm gonna write something, it's gonna be something that I would want to read or watch. I like, Shaun of the Dead, Tucker and Dale versus Evil is one of my favorite, horror movies because it's so ridiculous. Like it takes all the different tropes and kind of turns them on its head. The Evil Dead series, like even Drag Me to Hell has these terrifying yet comedic moments, like when they're doing the seance scene. I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a seance scene.
I love that movie.
And the guy gets possessed and he's kind of like floating in midair and he's like, dancing around in midair like a goddamn marionette. And it's like, oh, that's kind of funny. But at the same time, like if I saw that, I'd shit myself. Like that's terrifying.
He is like technically possessed by the devil or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. But the thing I like, and no one has mentioned this about my book yet, and this is for super, super hardcore horror fans, is the first page, the itemized invoice. the itemized invoice I originally was going to go with as my cover, and the gentleman at Source Point Press, Josh, was like, "No, we'll come up with a better cover. Like this is terrible." Like, and I was like,
You're like, I love this. I worked so hard on it.
"Well, I did put a significant amount of work into this particular thing. So if you look at it, it's an itemized invoice for an exorcism, and the invoice number is 1973. The invoice date is 12/26. Well, 12/26, 1973 is when Exorcist made its way to theaters.
Nice.
The bill 2, that is the address of the McNeil family. The bill from Karras and Marin, Father Karras, Father Marin. And so what I did, if you see the sales tax is 8.25%, that is the real tax rate of 3600 Prospect Street Northwest in Georgetown.
Oh, interesting.
So the $615.24
plus 825 is 666.
Yes.
Nice.
So I kind of worked backwards from there and just kind of put the name and address on there because I like Easter eggs and I really like, like little nods to other things. And if you're going to call something, how much do you tip an exorcist?
You should work it out. You need to answer that question.
So that whole thing came from, the story that's in there called Gratuity, which that's where also the cover art came from. And I remember telling people about the title, and everyone I've told this title to was like, "Oh my God, that's an amazing title!" Like,
it's a very memorable title.
Exactly. Like if you're like, "Oh, I wrote this book. What's it called?" It's like, "Oh, it's called Starlight Destiny," and it's like, "Oh, okay," But if I say
like the Bible, no one's gonna read that.
Yeah. I mean, our Bible is fine, but the Bible,
so pretentious.
Yeah. And talk about a preachy book.
Everybody, but
this guy. But when you tell someone the name of your book is "How Much Do You Tip an Exorcist?" they're like, "Okay, that's I'll remember that."
Yeah.
And I got a chance because this has been in the works for 12 years, and I had well, not 12, 8. Sorry, it was 2012 when I really started writing. And I'd gotten a chance at a horror convention to meet one of the comic book writers for Source Point, Ben Goldsmith. Super cool guy.
This was back in 2012, you said?
This is last year.
This is last year, excuse me.
Last year when I met him. But I've been working on the book, all these stories I've had kicking around for the past 8 years.
Got it.
And I met Ben. We had him on our show, Throwdown Thursday, because he was releasing his book. If I move my head out of the way, Chungo and the Broken Veil. He had a couple other awesome stories from Source Point called Beyond the Demon. The Sea is one of the ones he wrote. Seance Room, that's a whole series, and it's amazing. And we saw him again later on that year at another con, and he's like, "Oh, are you guys gonna, what are you doing? How you been?" And I mentioned that I wrote a book years ago called Monsters in the Closet, and he's like, "Oh, I didn't know you wrote. Like, we have a prose section that's always looking for good work. Like, so if your story is any good and you can get it around 150 pages ish, let us know. Are you going to be at this con?" And I was like, "No." He's like, "Well, you're going to be at this one." And I said, "Yes." And he's like, "All right, bring, format the thing up, get everything together and bring it, and you can pitch the book." And so me never having pitched a book before, not knowing what to do, I took the incredibly smart direction of printing everything out on regular printer paper and cramming it into like a plastic container and handing this 3-pound plastic container to the guy. Going, "Here's my book." And he was flipping through it and he was like, "Wow, I really like the artwork." And it's not the artwork that you see now. It was previous artwork that she had done. She kind of redid everything because we wanted it all in grayscale and it needed to be specific formatting, and he's like, this is great. He goes, I can sell this book on this title alone. But, looking at the art and everything, he was like, oh, this is great. So I was able to pitch the book, and they accepted it. And then, we've been in touch back and forth for the past, a year at this point. And then one day he's like, oh yeah, I was gonna check on you, because I periodically check in on everybody, make sure they're doing okay during quarantine and everything. And I checked in on him, and he's like, oh, I was just about to text you in the next couple of days because the book's almost ready. And I'm like, awesome. So that Friday I was at Walmart, and I had to pick some stuff up, and he messages me. He goes, hey, do you want to see the cover wrap for the book? And I was like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, of course.
And he sent me the picture, and I had to fight to keep from bawling in Walmart, because I was so overwhelmed with emotion.
Dude, honestly, I think like going to Walmart to cry because you're overwhelmed with emotion is like a reasonable thing to do, and you just happen to be there. So it would have been all right if, if it's like 3 a.m. and you're going through some shit, Walmart's always open.
Yeah, I was gonna say like that. I wouldn't have even been like one of like the 10th most noticeable person there.
Bob just I think gave our buddy B Rob a shout out.
Oh, nice. But yeah, it was just overwhelming. And like, I sent it to my wife, and she was like, oh my God, crying at Walmart would be random. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I was just so overwhelmed. And like within the next few days, like a buddy of mine who writes for a horror site messages me. He goes, hey, this just came across my email, and it was a goddamn press release for me. Like, it was so weird. I'm like,
and you didn't send it to him. He just came across it on his own.
Because he like the site he works for, Broke Horror Fan, like they get like, hey, you're a horror place, like check this out. And like,
but that's like the best, like, because like we both podcast. You'll tell people about shit you got going on, but like when somebody hears about it and you didn't tell them, like.
Yeah, they tell me.
Yeah,
like, hey,
yeah, like that's amazing.
I was like, can you send it to me? Like,
I'd like to read this.
I haven't seen it. And like, I started seeing it pop up on social media, like Facebook and Twitter and all these places. Like, it's like, oh, hey, this book being released from Source Point Press. And it's just like, oh my God. Like, and I was messaging Jeanette. I'm like, I messaged her. I was like, hey, do you want to see the cover wrap for the book? And she's like, oh my God, yes. And I sent it to her, and she was losing her mind. Like, we're both going nuts, because it's just like,
it's real.
She's been publishing a couple other books already. Like, she's done illustrations for other people, but like this one is a little different, because like, I don't know how close to like the other people she is, but like, her and her husband are very close with us, Ashes and I. Like, I think back in May, we did like a Discord watch party of Beastmaster.
Nice.
Like, that's how our relationship is. Yeah, it was just one of the coolest things. And some of the stories that are in there, like you were alluding to, one of them is very, very dark. And I tend to kind of warn people about it. Rise of the Vanquished.
Yeah, that's the one. That's that one. Like, when I was reading it, it's kind of like, I want to hear you, sir. I'm sorry to interrupt, but like, you're going from like happy haiku, fun story about a woman that like, kills you after a hockey game or whatever. And then it's just like, and then this happened, and it's just like, that's definitely, in my opinion, the darkest part of your book. It's the, like, if I were to put a trigger warning anywhere, that would be the one.
Yeah, I've been telling people about that one, because it's the one. It's like, one of these things is not like the other.
Yeah.
It's instead of like, oh, this is like fun comedy and like tense action, because the one that you're referring to, the girl on the train, like, it's a slow burn, and then like the last page and last page, maybe
even
page and
paragraph, really. Yeah, like it's
it ramps up real quickly and comes to an end. It's like slow, roll, like going up the roller coaster, and like there's just that one drop. Like that's all you get.
That one did make me laugh though, because you did have a very slow burn to get it started. If I'm not mistaken, that's the first short story in the book. But I also immediately, like, I was kind of giggling, and this might be too inside, but you're also a big sports guy. In fact, when I first started, like when we first started chatting on like Twitter or Facebook or wherever it was, I think you were writing for like a sports column at that time or something, but you even have a sports podcast now. And your detail with like describing was it the Bruins? I'm not as much into the sports as you are, but
Canadians, they're big rivalries going back to the 20s.
And you're like detailing like everybody's jersey. You're like talking about like the specifics of like, this was one from like the 97 season instead of like the 2008 season. I'm making that up, but my point is you had very specific details.
Yeah, well, I mean, my wife and I are big Bruins fans. She actually has Patrice Bergeron's signature tattooed across her forearm.
Oh, wow.
Like, we've gone to many games over the past 11 years that we got engaged at a Bruins game that they won in double overtime. So like the Bruins hold a place in our heart. Actually, the last game we went to, on our way out, we ran into the anthem singer and took a couple of pictures with him.
Cool.
He nice. Todd Angeli is his name. Like,
I don't recognize that name or the name that you have, or I'm sorry, your wife has on her forearm. So really, potato.
Well, I mean, it's a funny story because he took over for a guy who had done it for like 50 years, and when he's not singing the anthem, he tends bar, like at the Garden, which is kind of cool. But yeah, like this is based on a story where it's like I was trying to see like what jersey someone was wearing, because I couldn't tell. I was like, what jersey? Like I couldn't see the number. I couldn't see the name. Because, if you get one, you'll figure out the other. And like every time I tried to see, like, the train would shake or someone would stand in the way. And so I was like, oh, what if this is just like some dude who's actually named after a friend of mine? What if just like some dude who was just like really trying to figure out what like some girl looks like? But yeah, the trigger warning is definitely appropriate for Rise of the Vanquished, and it's like I don't want to. I've told a couple of people what it's about, like the basic gist of the story, but like it's that detail. I think the end, like all the stuff that they say to him,
yeah,
like it's like I don't know where my head was when I wrote that, but it definitely wasn't in the same place as when I wrote everything else.
Sure.
Because,
dude, honestly, it reminds me of the that Simpsons. It's now a meme, but the scene where it's like, "Stop it! He's already dead!" Like, spoiler alert, but it's like,
oh, when Homer kills the Krusty Hamburglar ripoff.
Yeah, and the kids are like crying. Like, that's kind of like how it felt reading the end of the Rise of the Vanquish, because like, yeah, it gets to a point, and then like I felt like with that one, I got the idea of where it was going, and I'm like, okay, this is an interesting idea, but then it's like, oh, like they're not stopping where I thought they would. Oh, they are continuing to go to places I did not realize were there.
Yeah, it was not. I mean, it was not it's not a pleasant story, but like I've gotten some compliments on it, like, wow, that was really dark, but like I can understand where it comes from, and like the last line of that story kind of ties it all together. I think
it gives you a like. So that was one that like my immediate reaction was like, I need to take a break from this afterwards. Like, but then also like, but I also kind of want to read something that's a little more funny, because that seems like a really heavy thing to like, bail on.
I need something nicer to get this wash this off my palate. I think I'll watch Cannibal Holocaust.
Yeah, that much more civil. No, but I did honestly that story. I mean, it's still. I don't know that it's my favorite one of the bunch, but it definitely stands out the most of the bunch. It's the most memorable of the ones that I read in the sense that it made an impact. Like it's not just like a cool. It is a cool story, bro. But also like it's a heavy story.
Yeah, like that's yeah, not my. It's not my favorite. Like I think it's one of the darkest things I've written, but I will say though that I think my least favorite story is The Librarian versus the Controller.
Really? I actually like that one.
I just reread it and I was like, I didn't like that as much. Like
I thought it was a fun, like clever little twist at the end. I thought that was neat.
Yeah, I was just trying to write something like a quick story. Like I feel like that could have been fleshed out a lot more, but like I didn't want to put a ton of detail into a lot of these. Like I wanted it because I'm not like trying to build worlds here. I'm just trying to tell quick stories.
Mm-hmm.
I will say though, my favorite story out of all of them is the last one, Winter's Discontent.
Okay.
And
I would have assumed it would have been the robotic alligator, like the
Octopus and Roboctopus.
Yes.
Those are fun. Those were probably like the most fun to write. But Winter's Discontent is part of a larger narrative, and it's kind of like the prologue to a much larger story that has influenced from all kinds of. It's basically it's part of a larger story called Mist and Shadow, where it's kind of trying to think of the best way to describe it, like Game of Thrones, Stephen King's Dark Tower, the Universal Monsters, Lord of the Rings, and a story like a series of stories that most people have never heard of called the White Mountain Trilogy, or the Tripod Trilogy by John Christopher. It was a young adult novel that I read when I was in 4th grade, and I really liked it.
So it kind of just like made an impact on you moving forward to getting to where you got with your story.
Yeah, and it's like all of those things together, and like I've got detailed notebooks full of like, this is what the different plants are called, and this is what the different land masses are, and like here are the moons, and this is like, it's deep. Like there's a lot to it, and this first story kind of sets up the main conflict, and I enjoy it. I really like you got to throw Ancient Aliens in there as well, because there's a couple of different alien races that are involved. But that one to me is a lot of fun, and I think it's the best written one that's come out so far. But obviously everyone's going to have different opinions.
Sure, yeah. And I think that's another thing that's a benefit of the style of your book is again, this, like this would have been a book that I think I even mentioned in my review again, but like if I were like at a book fair when I was in school, if that's still even a thing, school or book fairs, I don't know. But like this would have been like one of those gems you would have found that you weren't looking for. But like you said, it's got a great title, it's got great cover art, and then it's got everything from gags to short stories to lists of things like terrible superhero powers or whatever it was. It's just all over the place, and it's the type of thing you could like pass around with like your friends and get like a good variety of. And to your point of and not everyone's gonna have the same favorite, but this has a range. So if you do have a twisted sense of humor, or you're into just horror in general, or if you're into like the spirit of Halloween, as I very confusedly tried to explain my rationale of earlier, this book I think is going to be for that whole lot.
Yeah, it definitely has like a coffee table book type quality where you can read quickly through the stories and like really like the 2-sentence stories and the haikus and like really appreciate the detail that goes into the artwork.
You could tell the 2-story sentences like around like the living room or campfire or Zoom call for modern times. And like they almost have like an element of water cooler jokes where, it's just like something you hear somebody deliver that joke and you're like, I could tell that. These kind of have that same like repeatability to them, which is like a really fun thing to think about, having your work like, spread word of mouth style like the ancients or whatever.
Yeah. Coming down as an oral history. And in 1,000 years, like I'm deified somehow.
I love it. They better get the pink right. They better get the pink right.
Oh yeah, like that's the most important part.
So we're actually like 40 minutes into this. We're getting like a little close. We have plenty of time, but there were a couple of things that I want to make sure to get to. Then we can come back around and talk about anything at all. But you mentioned you started writing this in 2012. I had some friends earlier. You're a very smart, funny, creative guy, but I know a lot of people that are smart, funny, and creative. What does it take to get those creative ideas from, hey, I can do this, to doing it?
A lot of it has to do with your determination. Like this was a book that I wanted to come out. I didn't know exactly how it was going to come out. I knew it was going to be called How Much Do You Tip an Exorcist? I just didn't know what all of the content was going to be. Like a lot of these stories, like the 2-sentence stories came about in about 2016. The horror haikus, like I was talking about, was 2015. Some of the other stories, like The Twisted Tragic Tale of Michael Ravenshadow, Tiny White Will Punch Your Fucking Lights Out, and Too Ugly for Heaven. Those 3.
You're really good at titling things, for what it's worth.
Well,
if nothing else, you can make a career out of just making titles of stories and books moving forward.
Well, I have to give some credit because 2 of the 3 of those, Too Ugly for Heaven is actually a song from a band that they're friends of mine, the Deadites. And if you look right here, that's their poster, and a lot of them signed, including Dynamo, Tiny White, and Michael Ravenshadow.
Oh wow! So, but still, I'm still giving you credit because you did name the book how much do you tip an exorcist?
Oh yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah,
that one.
Take the compliment, Patsy. No.
Well, thank you. Too Ugly for Heaven is one of their songs.
That's dope.
Tiny White Will Punch Your Fucking Lights Out was a story that was on their website, thedeadites.com, in 2010, but it wasn't that story. It was just about how somebody ate Tiny's vanilla bean ice cream and how pissed off he was. Had nothing to do with giant Lovecraftian behemoths. But I thought that had a good ring to it. And The Twisted Tragic Tale of Michael Ravenshadow, just I enjoyed that and just the way that sounded.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, those all go together. So basically, it's you have to be persistent. You have to be willing to find somebody you trust that you can have beta read for you. So it's like, hey, tell me what you think about this story. I do a lot of stuff now. I've learned over time. I run everything through, I use Google Chrome, I use Google Docs, and I run everything through Grammarly because it's a free extension, and it will like, hey, this sentence doesn't make sense. Add a comma, take a comma out, switch this, the verb agreement doesn't work. And read your story out loud. You also have to be willing to accept criticism. My harshest critic.
Sorry, we can move on. No, I'm just kidding.
Critic, aside from myself, is my wife. Like, she will not just be like, "Ooh, that's so great. Let's put it up on the fridge." She'll be like, "That doesn't make any sense, and you use that word way too many times." Like, if you read your story, like for the one that comes out for VHS Nightmares, I use the word strange like 8 times in 2 paragraphs. And I was like, think of a different word, dipshit. Like,
we need a thesaurus.
thesaurus.com is an amazing resource.
Sure.
Thesaurus.com and dictionary.com. Another thing that I found is I get a lot of influence from certain music that I listen to. So I'm a big Motionless in White fan, and they have a song called Carry the Torch, and one of the words they use is threnody. And I had no idea what threnody meant, so I looked it up.
It sound cool as shit, so you're like, I got to use that.
And I did. Threnody is a like a funeral song or a dirge. So in Winter's Discontent, her axe is named Threnody because it's a badass axe and she's badass. And like, what's a better name for a song, for a implement of death than Threnody? Like,
yeah, it's good.
This is the last thing,
and it's
you hear.
it's the first, it's the last thing you hear. Fucking God, that's good. I like that.
So, take influences. If you have an idea, text it to yourself, write it down, because if you think, I'll remember that, no, you won't.
Same rule for joke writing, everybody. If you ever thinking you have a joke idea, do not trust your brain to remember that great idea later. It will not. Always write down your thoughts.
Write it down, text it to yourself, write it down, use your voice.
How else will people know that we're batshit crazy when we die if they don't have like journals full of our fucking like ridiculous ideas?
Right. You have to have. That was actually a story that didn't make it into this book. There was a 2-sentence story called Inspiration. It was, I always carry a notebook with me in case inspiration strikes. I also wear a helmet in case a brick strikes or something like that. Like in case I'm struck by an idea, and I also wear a helmet in case I'm struck by a brick or something.
Nice.
That one didn't quite make it in there. So
you gotta have editing at some point. You gotta make cuts.
Yeah, so it's tough when it comes to publishers, because like one of the first thing they're going to tell you is, okay, it's like a 6-month wait, and it's like, but I want it now. So that's tough to do. So with my last book, which was Monsters in the Closet.
Nice.
This is 99 cents on Kindle or $5 in
paperback format.
Yeah, on Amazon. I self-published it through Amazon's Create Space. They help you do all your stuff you want to do, but you have to do everything. Everything that's happening is on you. The formatting, the editing, everything. So if something's messed up, that's on you.
Fault.
And for some people that will work. Like I went through, for my first 2 books, it was essentially self-publishing. The first 2 books are called Cycle of the Hunter and Mist and Shadow, which I know I mentioned earlier, but it was a similar idea that I had, but on a much smaller scale. The company that I went through doesn't exist anymore. They were called Publish America, and they were utter garbage. They're like, yeah, we're going to do X, Y, and Z for you. But like, you don't get, I think I made, well, they give you a symbolic $1 that they send to you. But like, I think I made $14 in 8 years.
Ooh.
On my books. Selling them at conventions was okay. Like I would spend $100, get 15 books, which is insanity, but I would get royalties on the ones that I bought. Like that's really where my royalties would come from.
Sure.
It didn't sell well, and they're like, yeah, so your book, your $20 paperback book that from some guy no one's ever heard of isn't selling well, so our plan is to sell it for $25. I'm like, that's generally not how things go.
I must have missed that lesson in economics, because that's not how I remember it.
not the demand, so let's charge more. That way,
Yeah.
that'd be like, like the Calvin and Hobbes strip where they're trying to sell lemonade, and he's like, "Yep, it's $100 a glass," and he's like, Hobbes is like, "Why would you sell $100 a glass?" He goes, "Well, this way I only have to sell one, and I'm done." You want me to sell 400 to get to it to get to $100? No, I'll sell one, and I'm done. But yeah, it's persistence. I've gotten tons of stories rejected. There's always somebody looking for submissions. Like several of the stories that are in here have actually been published in another anthology. It was the 2012 leap year edition of Daily Frights, where it's one story for every day of the year.
Oh, cool.
And I got 3 stories in that.
Not bad.
Which was cool. One of them, I think, was on my wife's birthday.
Oh, wow. That's really cool.
So, like, you open up to a specific day, and, so that's cool. Like, figure out, like, there's always an anthology for whatever you're going to be publishing. Like, if you were like, oh, I want to write about Victorian era vampires, there's an anthology for that. Like, oh, I want to write steampunk werewolves, there's an anthology for that. You could start off by doing that. Write some short stories, or whatever narrative kind of fits your storytelling ability. Like, I've tried different things, like the whole flash fiction thing, which is what Daily Frights was. 500 words or less, tell a whole story. And I got a couple decent ones, but I got one really good one. And I've gotten compliments on that. It's called Pot Roast, and it's essentially about a guy who cooks and eats his wife. And the final line was, say what you want about her cooking, but his wife made a hell of a roast. Like, that's kind of what I did. Like, and I've been kind of struggling for a long time. Like, I'm almost 40, and this is the first time someone else liked my ideas enough to publish a whole bunch of them, not just one story here or there.
Yeah.
Like Daily Frights, I bought the book, but I haven't seen any royalties on that. Like, it was free. And that's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to send out a lot of stuff for free. Like, very rarely will you be like, oh, this is my first story, and then sell it for tons of money. Like, I don't have a literary agent. I don't even know how to go about getting a literary agent. One of the things that has helped me is the fact that I have been doing my podcast for 4+ years and made lots and lots of connections. And that's also helped, where I've supported other people. I've supported a lot of independent creators, whether they be, writers, artists, directors, actors. I've supported so many of these people, and I've been, a positive person, to like, oh, you should check out, Bad CGI Sharks. It's such a good movie.
You've been a great ally of my podcast, Best Darn Diddly, man. I don't know how many people you've turned on to that show. So, yeah, you're definitely a big presence in the podcasting community, and you're constantly outside of podcasting. I mean, your show is so eclectic in that it covers a huge spectrum of artistic contributions, movies, comic books, TV shows, all sorts of cool stuff where you meet a lot of really, really neat people. And you are absolutely just like a ray of positivity on like everything you touch in that spectrum. Sorry to cut you off to compliment you, but it needed to be said.
I appreciate it. And that's, that's going to be the other thing. Like, don't be, I'm a part of the New England Horror Writers, and I've been there since 2008. And, there are people that it's like, oh, I submitted to this anthology. Like, I've submitted to this anthology. These people are my friends, like some of the editors and the people that are putting them together. And it's like, oh, I submitted this. And they're like, yeah, it wasn't good enough. And I was like, oh, well, what was wrong with it? Tell me what was wrong with it. So I can go back and funny enough, Rise of the Vanquished was one of those that got rejected for an anthology. So I went back, I polished it up. I tried to make it better. And, based on your, reaction and a couple other people's reactions, I did that. I was able to make it better, and I was able to, tell a better story because of that. So you don't take rejection personally. It's like, it might just not be what they were looking for. Don't try to, freak out your audience. And it's like, oh, well, so then, the guy killed the dog and ate the dog and then, washed it down with a nice cool glass of, baby. Like, you don't need to go over the top. Like there are, that's a genre. Like splatterpunk is a thing, like over the top gore. Like, J.F. Gonzalez wrote a book called Survivor, which is very similar in a couple of aspects as far as like the visceral reaction you would get to, say, a Serbian film.
Oh,
like that's the type of stuff he wrote. Very descriptive, very graphic, and like some terrible situations.
That's almost like back in the day in like college and high school or whenever, like you'd have like a game like my friends and I'd play is essentially just asking, like, you have to choose between A and B and trying to make A and B the absolute worst possible things that you could possibly think of to have to choose between.
Like Biden.
Perfect example. Perfect example. Yes. But like, I mean, just really pushing those boundaries. And I mean, when you mention a Serbian film, those boundaries get pushed to some fucked up places.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are certain things like in a film that might be implied where people will be very explicit when it comes to depicting that in their work. That's not overly, like, if you're coming out and you're like, okay, this is what's popular, I have to do this. Like, don't try to do what's popular. Try to do what what your strengths are, right? Something about. Like, if you're going, and the biggest thing, I cannot stress this enough because I hate this more than anything when it comes to any type of media. If you have a set of rules, stick to it.
Yeah.
If you're like, okay, you're writing Gremlins and it's like, all right, you can't feed them after midnight, you can't get them wet, and bright light kills them. But then, like, you give them a glass of water after midnight and nothing happens.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what?
It's my least favorite parts in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise is the second part, and it has all to do with the fact that Freddy comes out when nobody's asleep.
Yep.
And that is literally like the one rule. Like they even tweak the rules to that series. I'm like, I'm fine with it. I get it. We're into sequel number 6 at this point. We got to change some shit. Cool. But like, just, at least pretend to respect your rules or give a really good reason why they're broken.
Well, I mean, I bring up Ant-Man all the time. Like, oh, well, when you shrink down, you are, you retain all your mass. Oh, really? So even though he's an inch tall, he still has all the mass of a 220-pound man? Oh, how does he run on the edge of a barrel of a gun?
Mm-hmm.
How is Michael Douglas carrying around a 60-ton tank in his pocket? Like, how is, Walton Goggins, rolling a building around?
Yeah, with like little plastic wheels.
Yeah. No. Like, so if you set rules, stick to them, be consistent. And I go with the rule that George R.R. Martin talked about.
Take forever to finish.
No.
Okay, sorry. Different rule.
Different rule. The dragons are coming. If you have been sprinkling foreshadowing and, setting things up for a certain outcome, like he said, if you set everything up and all the foreshadowing and the clues lead to the fact that the butler did it, but somebody figures out that the butler did it, don't suddenly be like, oh, it wasn't the butler, it was the chambermaid. Like,
and you can't just retrofit everything to like make sense. It's too late.
just because somebody guesses your ending, that doesn't mean anything. Like, and that's what they did with the TV show. Like, whoa, all this stuff was set up, so we wanted to surprise people. The whole subverting your expectations, like, with Rian Johnson in The Last Jedi. My expectations were subverted. I thought it was going to be a good movie.
I was going to make the same joke. That's great. Patsy, that actually, we are at our hour mark, dude. I want you to be able to plug real quick. I'm so glad you touched on your podcast connected to your writing, because I actually intended to ask you about that very thing, and I'm sure we'll have you back on again to talk more about it. But for now, 30-second plug of your stuff and where they can buy your book.
You can find pretty much everything on throwdownthursdaypodcast.com. That has links to the latest episode of Throwdown Thursday. You can find us on thedorkening.com. You can find How Much Do You Tip an Exorcist on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can go to, I would appreciate more if you go to Oxeye Media, OXEYEMEDIA.com. You can get the book there. You can get the T-shirt there, which is awesome. I get royalties on the book, but not the shirts. But if you want to look handsome and sexy, I guarantee that it will make you jump higher and run faster. And not a guarantee.
And whoever you are attracted to will be more attracted to you than they were before, for sure.
It's definitely a conversation starter. Wear it to church. wear it to school, to church, wherever family gatherings and good times are had.
Hell yeah, dude. Guys, follow Patsy, buy his book, buy a t-shirt, buy two. Bob loves your book too, Patsy, for what it's worth. Just calling him out. Always good to have Bob in the chat. And I had it locked, Bob, but you're always welcome to jump on as well, as I've told you in the past. But Patsy, come back, bring ashes. We'll talk about something else on a Friday afternoon. I will be back again next Friday. I don't know what I'm talking about yet. I know Toby will be with me again, and he's always a lot of fun. And it'll be something we're going to nerd out about. So come back next week for Mr. Most Days Off Loves Everything. And in the meantime, check out my Simpsons podcast, Best Darn Diddly. That's Diddly. And until next time, be cromulent to each other.